Is City Council, July 16th, 2019. I invite you to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Clufus.
Present.
Councilmember Branquinho.
Here.
Councilmember Cuff. Councilmember Howell.
Here.
Mayor Holland is absent.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, no, it's fine. Here you go, Jack.
Thanks.
That wasn't you, but that's okay. It's fine. It's okay.
Excellent. Okay. First order of business, we'll open up the first portion of public participation. If you would like to address the council, please approach the podium and address your name to us, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin. All right, fair enough. We will close portion of public participation. That brings us to item E, which is the approval of the minutes for the July 2nd business meeting and the minutes for the July 9th workshop.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say nay. Motion passes 4-0. That brings us to item F, which is the presentations. We have a request from Flagler County Sheriffs for additional funding for fiscal year 2020, and I believe Officer Sturbridge is here to present. Excellent. Morning.
Morning. Where do you want me?
The middle is fine.
Somewhere where we can hit you easy.
Yes, sir. I am right here. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. Mark Sturbridge, representing Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley, who is at a sheriff's meeting this morning and is unable to be here. I do have a presentation I'd like to kind of walk everybody through just very briefly. And the sheriff happens to be watching live also. Thank you for the technology to be able to do that.
Good morning, Sheriff Staley.
I want to walk you through where we are today. At present time, we have about 67 members, which includes 64 law enforcement officers, public safety officer, and records clerk assigned to the Palm Coast District Office. It also includes 5 motor units and 5 city traffic units. Other personnel assigned to the patrol areas or serve in supervisory capacities within the District 2 Palm Coast District, which is all inclusive of the city of Palm Coast. The sheriff's been a good steward with your tax dollars. He came to you more than a year ago and said, we have a traffic problem. We would like 5 additional traffic officers. Those 5 traffic officers came in, and he delivered a 42% reduction. Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
He delivered a 42% reduction in fatal crashes as a result of your foresight and being able to fund those positions in the prior year. Crime is currently down in our entire community, 22%, but calls for service are up. As more residents and businesses come into this community and grow, growth equals increased service demands. We are asking the city to fund 6 additional deputies. These deputies would be dedicated solely to the Palm Coast District. They would be assigned to what we're going to call a power shift. A power shift is essentially a squad that is working during peak periods of time for greater service delivery at those times when they are needed the most. Currently today, we only have 2 shifts that run 6 to 6 and 6 to 6 within the city of Palm Coast. Sheriff Staley budget submission to the Board of County Commissioners included a request for 3 additional deputy sheriffs plus 3 support personnel, 2 in the communications center and 1 evidence technician. The current projections increases volume causes our communications center to have an increased calls for service. Last year, sorry, let me keep up with this. Communication specialists answered over 144,000 phone calls last year alone, and the projections are there to be higher. So as we look at this information, we can see that these 2 additional communicators will actually be used primarily for handling calls for service within the county. Now, the Board of County Commission did not have to fund those positions, but they are going to do so. With approved growth, all of our services increased. That's not necessarily related directly to criminal activity, but is also related to quality of life related issues, parking in the swale, dogs barking, and other traffic related issues within a community. Those calls for service will always continue to increase, even though the crime may be decreasing at the same time. The Flagler County Board of County Commissioners recently voted to support the building of a new District 2 office behind the public library at Belterre and Palm Coast Parkway. They are investing heavily within the city of Palm Coast. Between $12 and $15 million is the estimate built out of that particular project. We're working right now doing a space study to find out and determine the size of that particular facility, and they will hopefully be ready to go within the next 2 years and have that entire project completed. There's been a lot of discussion about dual taxation, or what is the sheriff's responsibility for basic services that are provided. There's certainly, this issue's been addressed across the state many times, and the Florida Supreme Court has kind of ruled that the county doesn't have an obligation to a city to provide beyond basic law enforcement services. And they ruled that it's not a dual taxation issue regarding that process. Many of those people have questioned, well, why are we paying this much in taxes and then having to pay a contract with the sheriff? Well, the answer is quite simple. The county does not have to provide services inside the city limits. You provide fire services, or you can have your own law enforcement agency, or you can contract to provide those services within the process. But the Florida Supreme Court, back in 1984, settled the issue within the state of Florida. We're going to talk about a tale of 2 cities very briefly. The city of Palm Coast and the deal that you guys have created for your residents as compared to another local city within our community. The city of Deltona has a population of about 91,000. Our estimated population is just under 85,000. Total law enforcement personnel assigned to the city, 67. In Deltona, it is 79. The per capita cost for law enforcement in the city of Deltona is $130.02. The per capita cost for law enforcement services in your community, in the city of Palm Coast, is $41.44. A significant savings the way that you're doing business.
Is Deltona in the same paradigm that we are, where they're policed by the county and then they subsidize in additional?
Identical situation. Identical situation. They are. And as you can see, their annual budget for basically having 12 more people is, well, it's $11,800,000 as compared to $3,500,000. Calls for service continue to increase. Of course, we've seen a 15% increase over the past 5 years with our calls for service. The bulk of all calls for service countywide, more than 80%, are within the city limits of Palm Coast. One of the standards across the nation that law enforcement, a metric that law enforcement uses and communities have adopted, is the law enforcement officers per 1,000 ratio. The International Association of Chiefs of Police recommended 2.5 per 1,000. As you can see, we are currently about 1.62 per 1,000. The state of Florida average is 2.28 per 1,000, and most cities actually are above that 2.5 to 3 per 1,000. Within our own community, both the city of Bunnell and the city of Flagler Beach are well above 3 per 1,000 as far as law enforcement officers to population. The only other thing I would want to back up and add to the city of Deltona, they pay 100% of the cost for law enforcement service. That's why you saw that figure of $11 million as compared to being supplemented by the Board of County Commission. And moving forward, our population continues to increase within the community. As you can see the projections, and it's no surprise to any of you that our population will certainly continue to grow and double, and as we bring in additional growth in business, we're going to have additional services that will be required. In your own survey in 2018, Palm Coast residents responded they feel safe in their neighborhood, and 82% felt the Sheriff's Office was doing an excellent or good job for you. And why that is important is because even though we show a 22% decrease in actual crime within the community, it is still about how people feel within the residents. If they feel safe, they will be involved in activities. They will go to our parks. We can lure a business into our communities. We can have great economic development, but if people don't feel safe, those things won't happen within our community. The city continues to grow, and crime reduction is not yet crime elimination. And I'm quoting the sheriff by saying, "It is not time to take the foot off the gas. We can't lose our gains that have been significant." And before I ask if you have any questions, what I'd like to kind of point out is, I know today that you're setting your trim rate on your tax rate. And we are all fortunate to know that there has been a little bit of surplus within our current tax rate. And the sheriff, and we're not advocating an increase in taxes maybe to fund all 6 of those positions, but if there was an opportunity to fund 3 or 4 of those positions with any potential surpluses the city has, it would help us to maintain the momentum and keep moving forward in our crime reduction, crime elimination within our community. It is the most dangerous thing is we can do is sit back and say, we're at 22% at a historic reduction in crime and crime rate within our community, and not do anything further to keep it going in that momentum. So that is what we're asking you to consider today, is if you will do that and look for those opportunities to fund us. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. That was phenomenal. One question I'd like to ask is, how has the city's cooperation with our traffic camera monitoring system for our traffic lights helped improve your ability to police our city?
We're still working out the logistics behind the scenes to get that system up and running fully with us. One of the issues, of course, we're facility challenged, I guess, would be the best way to put it. And one of the issues that we have within our own organization is we don't necessarily have the proper space to fully develop our real-time crime center. And within our real-time crime center, the concept is that as these crimes occur, for example, let's say at Boulder Rock and Palm Coast Parkway, somebody goes in and foolishly robs the Chick-fil-A. We could then use that group of people who would be monitoring those areas to look for people on their avenues of escape. Unfortunately, because we are facility challenged, we don't have space to fully bring those components all together. We are still working towards that, and we're going to figure out a way to do that in the very near future that'll help certainly quickly apprehend those suspects. And the men and women of the Flagler County Sheriff's Office continue to deliver for the community. They've done a great job in spite of some of the strained circumstances that they've had to operate. We've had some tragic events within the past week. We had a murder that was very unfortunate. Of course, the men and women of the organization, that they came together and were able to solve that crime and take somebody off the street. They keep doing their job. We need to help them continue to be able to do that job.
I have a couple questions. First, Chief, what is your turnover? And that would include also the corrections. Now, we know traditionally corrections, it's a bigger turnover than the other side, the LE side.
Well, because of the growth that we've actually had, we've hired a lot of new folks within the organization. And I don't have the exact number off the top of my head.
Swag it.
I think we're probably turning 15 to 18%. Okay. We also have a lot of folks now that are getting closer to their end of their career, so a lot of those are retirements and the younger generation, people who have left to go to completely different professions.
Now, with that, one of the things that you and I know from being in this business, this may be for some of the new people their first employment in LE, and they're always looking to maybe go to Orlando or Jacksonville after they get some time built up because they pay higher. Where are we on the raises for our people?
Well,
Is that a county thing totally, or?
Well, that's a great question. Where we are today, thankfully, in the four-county region, Putnam, Volusia, and St. John's, and Flagler, we are the highest starting pay with the best benefits, and that's what we worked for the past 2 years to get it there, to be more competitive. We want people to come to our community and stay. When my wife and I decided to move up north from where we were, we didn't stop in Volusia County for a reason. This is a great community. I've encouraged, and recently my daughter, her husband, their 5 children are now Palm Coast residents, and they've recently purchased a home here because it's a great community to be in. And we're hoping both the charm and our school system and such that we have within this community will attract the kind of growth that we want.
Yeah, and then I'd ask our city manager about the feasibility of trying to support the sheriff's office without increasing our taxes. You know, what can we cut if we had to, and what do we have in surplus? And of course, this would also be a part of our finance department.
I think it also would help the conversation if we spoke about the other competing efforts that as a city.
That's it. We got to look at the whole picture.
Swales, road repairs,
Right.
those type of things, communications department, the fiber and infrastructure. We have a lot of projects that could.
Yeah, and we have to prioritize big time. I mean, the stormwater, I feel that we taxed the people last year to enhance the cleaning of these swales and other areas that have been an issue. But I hold law enforcement very dear, and I understand, the need. There's no question about it. But we also have to sit down and scratch our heads to figure out the prioritization. I know you got the project with Donald here now, and we hopefully can get some income from that, more than what has been coming in, and that might be something to look at. But I do want to support you as best I can. I think what you're asking for, and I know that the county's going to pick up the bailiff for the new judge and some other things.
And a couple other deputies, yes, sir.
Yeah. That's the only question I have, is we're just going to have to kind of do some serious realignment if we can, to find funds. What are you asking for totally in terms of if I were to say I could give you 3 new deputies, what would that roughly run?
Just really off the top of my head, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $330,000.
Okay, so a little over 100 grand for each.
Yes,
Does
sir.
that include a vehicle for them too?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
First of all, Sheriff, thank you for the job you guys are doing. Been there, done that, and I know every time you put that uniform on, you become a target.
Yes, sir.
There's no money that pays for that. We also have other priorities, but safety and security and the quality of life which comes by inherence of the safety and security should be the most done, the most looked upon thing. At least I would like that. The swells are important, no doubt about it. But in between having a little water coming to my house and a thief coming into my house, a robber coming to my house, I'd rather have the water, to be honest with you. So without going to raise taxes, I'm going to have a meeting with the city manager, if he allows me that time, and go for as much as we can to help the sheriff, and you could count on me 100% behind that. I think the job you guys are doing are phenomenal with the amount of guys that we have over here. And for us not to see the crime go up, we need you to stop it.
Right.
And therefore, once again, thank you very much. And the quality of life and the safety of security It's our most important thing. So count on me, guys, to help you out as long as we don't go crazy, and we could do it
Right.
without raising taxes, okay?
Right.
Thank you.
Gabe did a great job and his crew there the other day on that murder, by the way.
They did a wonderful job on
They
that.
did.
Are there any opportunities for the city to offer space for the real-time crime unit? And this would be a question for our city manager and obviously staff as well. I'm just thinking about opportunities that the sheriff's office and the city can, excuse my buzzword here, but synergize to try to act as a multiplier for the police force. And the other technology initiative that I've read about other places are red light extenders and how that can, decrease traffic incidents and then perhaps reprioritization of staff, but that's way above and beyond my level of expertise. But have we broached the subject of if we can kickstart the real-time crime unit a little bit faster, we might be able to?
The city manager and the mayor, have gotten together. We've looked at some facilities to try to bring these functions together. One of the issues about isolated functions is they need the support of those around them. So to carve out space just for one piece of the function in a different location makes it that much more difficult. I mean, we're on 3 different floors within the courthouse, and we have difficulties communicating internally and collaborating on things. To pull it out, we have Matt Morton took myself, the sheriff, around. We looked at several facilities trying to and we certainly appreciate the city's efforts in that, trying to make it all fit for us. It just to isolate it would be difficult. We're always open to options, though. It's been a long haul without having a home, so.
Understood.
Sheriff, the chief, what's the total amount of sheriffs, the whole department, deputies that we have?
We have a total department strength is 313. We have about 168 law enforcement deputy sheriffs, and the rest are support and or detention.
Mark, I know in Sheriff Staley's initial request for the 6 deputies, he promised he wouldn't ask for any more next budget year if we could fund all 6.
Correct.
That said, a lot of emphasis is placed on the 2.4 deputies per 1,000 of population, and he's happy to show us how big we're going to be, and the inference is we're going to need a lot more deputies in the near future. What would it take, based on those population statistics, to reach the 2.4 or 2.5 deputies per 1,000? I certainly admire the work the department is doing, and I echo everything everyone else has said, but promising us if we give him 6 now, he won't ask for, that's a little bit like, you give me a puppy this year, and I won't ask for anything for my birthday. What's the final build out, if you will, if we can get up to 2.5 in terms of sworn officers?
That is a great question. When the sheriff inherited the organization, we were well behind, underfunded, understaffed. This is still continues to be an issue of sizing. If I had to kind of pull that number off the top of my head, it would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of, to get that 2.5, of about 40 more people.
And my point is not to, put down the request for this year or budgeting for next year, but it seems to me that we have, in the long run, a real issue ahead of us if the goal is to get up to the state statistics that are recommended. And
the statewide goal is 2.8. 2.28 per 1,000. The sheriff's goal is to get us to about 2 per 1,000. Is where he would like to be. In his previous experience, one of the things the sheriff brought before the Board of County Commission was a very comprehensive manpower allocation growth plan based on projections. The sheriff is certainly willing to do that type of study, so we can project 5, 10, 15 years down the road of where we project our population to be and what the workload would be to make it more comprehensive than what we're doing today.
Yeah, because my concern is that the sheriff has what he needs to keep the community safe and be an effective force, but the 5 deputies last year, 6 deputies this year. I won't ask for any more next year, but that means I'm going to need 10 more the following year. You know, unlike some money we spend, you know, every deputy that gets added to our contract
Right.
is essentially an internal expense.
Right.
I mean, I can't see any city council member voting to cut the number of deputies in the sheriff's contract anytime in the future. So I would be very interested to see what the comprehensive plan with the county and what the projections are.
We would love to do that.
Yeah,
I would also be interested, I'm sorry, Bob, if I could.
that's okay. I don't know where the feedback's coming from, excuse me.
Any one-time investments that the city could install as far as hardware or additional infrastructure that would aid in your ability to police the city? I think that's something that the council would be interested in as well. Speaking in terms of what Bob just said, or Councilman Cuff, that it is an extended expense every time we add a police officer. But like you said, we absolutely need to continue to ensure that the public feels safe. So anything that we can do as a city that can enhance your ability to police, I think the council will be very interested.
Moving forward with technology is one of Sheriff Staley's big goals. Last year, we implemented a license plate reader system, and we started getting results early on. As we know, we had an individual who happened to stop in our city and had been profiled before back in 1998 on America's Most Wanted. We don't know why he stopped here, but we were able to find him, secure him before he could do any harm to anybody else. He just had been involved in a very violent carjacking and robbery. So we want to leverage every piece of technology that we can to be a force multiplier in this process. That's one of the very specific reasons we wanted to have the opportunity to be able to put a real-time crime center to leverage that technology to get things done, because that is a limited cost, not a reoccurring cost situation. But just like our fire departments and our other organizations, we have to do those projections. We have to look at what our staffing will be in the future and develop a more comprehensive plan of what we're doing.
Let me throw one other question at you. I'm curious, on your deputies, are you 100% staffed right now? You got a body, or you still got some vacancies?
Actually, what we have in training today, this day, takes us overstaffing.
Okay.
Because we're trying to plan ahead based on what our retirements and what our projected.
Are you guys, when you say you got some in training, you talking about St. John's or Daytona?
Both.
Recruiting?
Yes,
Recruits?
but no, we have adapted a new
In-house
recruiting
training?
model. We're doing in-house training with those, but we've also, for our recruiting, we've also adopted a new model to go out there and get the best of the best. We've developed relationships with Bethune-Cookman. We've developed relationships with Daytona State College and St. John's as well, because we do want to bring the best within our community. And thankfully, because of where the sheriff has brought the organization in pay and benefits, we're now no longer taking what's left over. You know, at last year there was a big scramble because of the legislative mandated staffing in our schools across the state of Florida.
Yeah, that was a big hit.
Everybody was scrambling to find personnel, and they were just clawing at it. Fortunately, we're not in that situation within our community. We can recruit the best of the best within the community. And we want to grow them from inside. That's why the magnet program at Matanzas High School is an excellent program, because we believe that for our children that are in this community, it gives us an avenue to keep them within our community and not have to send them off for employment elsewhere.
Yep, just want to add that once again, I'm proud of you guys, and just finish by saying that there's very little I wouldn't do for you, and also fire, of course, because you're part of one of my campaign promises, which was safety and security, because that will lead to quality of life. So thank you very much. Stay alert, stay alive.
Yes.
Okay. Council, other questions? No? Thank you very much. The presentation was phenomenal, and please continue to police our city and county well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark?
Okay, moving on. Section G, ordinances first read. Item 3 is an ordinance 2019 XX amendment to the Tuscan Reserve MPD development, agreement to add 8 additional units, amend the development standards, and clarify language for signs.
Mr. Mayor, title of this ordinance. This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, amending and restating the Madison Green and Tuscan Reserve Master Plan Development or MPD Development Agreement as to Tuscan Reserve only, providing for an increase in the maximum residential units from 115 to 123, and providing for revised development standards for parking, landscaping, buffer requirements, and additional language about signage, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and for an effective date. Mayor, Council, this is a quasi-judicial matter. If there have been any ex parte communications regarding this matter prior to today's hearing, those should be disclosed at this time.
Council, any disclosures?
Thank you, Mayor.
I see none. Morning, Jose. Ray?
Morning.
Good morning, Mayor and members of, Vice Mayor and members of City Council. Jose Papa for the Community Development Department. As stated, this application is really an amendment to an existing master plan development. And just to give you some background on it, this is called the Tuscan Reserve MPD. The amendment is for the 8.2 acres, which comprises the Tuscan Reserve parcel. This parcel is located north of State Road 100 and on Tuscan Reserve Drive. So it's adjacent to Madison Green, which I think is a developed apartment complex. It was originally approved in 2005 and then amended in 2014. Within the Tuscan Reserve MPD itself, there's already some existing buildings. There's two-story buildings comprising 16 units, and also developed on the site itself is the amenity center with a swimming pool and spa. So currently, it has a future land use map designation of mixed use. That's that red color here. And also, it has a zoning of master plan development, or MPD. This is a comparison of the current development potential and the proposed development potential. So the number of units is 115. That's currently what's approved. Under the proposed amendment, that would be increased by 8 units to 123. Your height will go from 40 feet to 45 feet. While your open space area will also increase. So a slight increase in open space area from about 195,000 square feet to 198,000 square feet. And that's accomplished by reducing the number of buildings on site from 9 to 8. And in terms of recreation, in addition to what's existing out there, the developer proposes to add amenities, including a playground or tot lot, and a dog park. There are slight increases in the setbacks, probably contributing to the increase in open space available to this project. And this is a comparison of the conceptual master plan. The one on the left is what's existing, which comprises of 9 buildings. And the one on the right, which is what's being proposed, will reduce that number of buildings to 8, again with the addition of a tot lot and a dog park on site. So just to summarize the request, it's for 8 additional units to bring the number of total units on site to 123, to adopt parking, landscaping, and buffer standards as written in the Land Development Code. So it would just come into compliance with the standards established in our LDC rather than a standard established specifically for the development. And the one other thing is the clarification that there was an existing sign easement on the east side of McCormick and State Road 100, and the applicant's intent is to reinstall that sign to identify the neighborhood, both Madison Green and Tuscan Reserve. So the analysis of the amendment, this amendment does not impact the level of service. It does not create an additional hazard. The development will still be required to follow all federal, state, and local regulations. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan and our land development code. Prior to this public hearing, there was a neighborhood meeting held on May 22nd, and the Planning and Land Development Regulation Board also held a public hearing on June 12, 2019. And the Planning Board and staff both recommend the approval of the Tuscan Reserve MPD amendment. And beyond this, if approved today, we will go to a second public hearing, and in the future, there will be site plan and plat approvals for the project still to come. And at this time, the applicant and the representatives are here to answer any questions, but staff would be also happy to entertain any questions.
Council, any questions? I have one. I would just ask for clarification on why the change. In my eyes, going from 9 buildings to 8 buildings would be a better footprint. Were there any, not ulterior, but different reasons for the changes? Was there anything specific?
Maybe the applicant would like to address that one. It's probably just a better product that they can provide, but.
Good morning, Michael Schimento for the applicant. As always, appreciate staff's helping us get through this process. We anticipate submitting a site plan application here shortly, and our goal is to commence construction by the end of the year. To answer your question, council person, is that essentially the prior concept plan was just that concept. This one is hard design buildings. We actually got in there and have developed how many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. So, from that prior building, less intensity was actually needed to accommodate it. So, just a reduction and a refinement of the footprint of each of the units.
Excellent.
I just had too that, by reducing that, they were able to provide a lot more amenities than the original plan.
And additional space on the sides of the buildings. Which
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah. Again, this has been engineered, and the buildings are designed architecturally and engineered. So, we're ready to proceed to vertical construction as soon as practicable. So if you all have any questions of us, we're here to answer them. I don't have a presentation.
Just Mike, either you or staff, the only access for this and Madison Green is McCormick Drive, correct?
That is correct. When we did the reapplication or the rezoning in 2014, staff was concerned about that. And we entered into a emergency ingress-egress with the adjacent property owners. So our community actually has the second emergency ingress to the west of the property that would come through the name of that development.
Yeah, Brookhaven.
Brookhaven.
Yep.
Brookhaven, and they had designed the road to accept our emergency, and there'll be a lockbox for fire and residents to. So it is compliant with the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Does the agreement, other than the sign easement, contemplate any improvements to McCormick Drive?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
According to the traffic study, there's plenty of capacity, and the turning movements obviously will be evaluated at the time site plan, as when concurrency will be given.
Okay. No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? No,
Thank
I see none. Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have,
Nick,
oh.
you have to do public participation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I now invite, let's bring it back to the public. Anyone who wants to come to the podium, please address the council, and you'll have 3 minutes once the clock starts.
Good morning, George Mayo, Palm Coast. By reducing the number of buildings, that's a good idea, have a footprint, but you're increasing the height of the buildings. Does this stay within code? Excuse me. And does this stay within precedent, or does the next person come in and say, we want to go from 45 to 51, and the next one say, we want to go from 51 to 63. So I'm just curious as to how that all figures in. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
I'm Deborah Wells, resident of Palm Coast since 2007. A long line of chain migration from New York City starting in 1986 to Palm Coast. So we have a big footprint here. But we all have homes. I'm interested in knowing how much you will be deliberating and voting on apartment dwellings that are actually in the affordable range for the types of jobs we have here in Palm Coast. Now, I don't see any national corporations or international corporations. I see retail, and I see food service, and I see people working for subcontractors. These people are in the lower middle class of economy. Are you going to make sure that these apartments and any others that you consider approving will be affordable for the people who actually work in Palm Coast, so that they don't have to drive in from a place that's actually affordable, like St. Augustine or Jacksonville? We need more affordable housing for the people who work here. Thank you.
Next speaker. All right, I'll close public participation. I will grab Deborah's question first, and I will defer to staff for Mr. Mayo's question. Deborah, a lot of the housing developments that we have inside of Town Center right now are specifically focused on providing that level of housing for the workforce that you and I believe our council envision being necessary in our city. So I thank you very much for that comment, but it absolutely is on the forefront of our minds to make sure we can provide that level of housing. And I will defer to staff as far as height regulations going from 40 to 45 feet.
Sure. Within our standard within our standard zoning districts, multifamily residential 1, multifamily residential 2, we have height limits of 40 feet and 60 feet. So a height of 45 feet is certainly well within the height limit established within our land development code.
Excellent. And in my opinion, that's a fair trade-off for the footprint of the buildings with the additional yard in between. Okay, excellent. Now we're set to move on.
Oh, motion and vote, please.
Oh, okay. I thought first read. Yeah, you're right.
Move approval. First reading.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Nay. Passes 4-0. All right. Moving on to item G4, which is also an ordinance for first read. Future land use map amendment for 49 plus or minus acres from Flagler County designations of commercial, high intensity, and conservation to city designations of mixed use and residential Ocean Village. Mr. Reichman?
Mr. Vice Mayor, Council, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the City of Palm Coast 2035 Comprehensive Plan, as previously amended. This is pursuant to Section Chapter 163 of the Florida Statutes. This ordinance amends the future land use map or flume designation for 49 acres, more or less, of certain real property from Flagler County future land use map designations of commercial, high intensity, and conservation to City of Palm Coast designations of residential and mixed use, as described in more detail in the legal description, which is attached to this ordinance. This ordinance provides for conflicts, ratification of prior acts, codification, severability, and effective date. Mr. Vice Mayor, Council, this is a legislative matter, not quasi-judicial.
Thank you. Jose, Ray?
Thank you, City Council. Just a brief introduction. This is a piece of property that partially was annexed in the city in 2017, and then the other piece was annexed in 2018. We went through and annexed the property, and now we are doing the land use change for that property. Historically, there's been some conservation easements on the property that they got their permitting through the agencies, and Jose will have some of those details with the land use change. And because there are two companion applications, Jose has one presentation for number 4 and number 5.
Thank you. Good morning again. This application is for a project commonly known, which will be commonly known as Ocean Village. The project is approximately 50 acres, located just north of Colbert Lane and north of State Road 100 and west of Colbert Lane. As Mr. Tyner stated, the entire parcel was annexed in pieces in both 2017 and 2018. Under the current future land use map designation, the entire parcel is designated as, as commercial high intensity. That is the Flagler County designation. That green parcel that you see within the box is a conservation parcel. And on top of that, there is a policy restriction on this parcel that limits current development to 260,000 square feet of commercial. That's under the current future land use map designation. Under the proposed future land use map designation, the proposal is to change approximately 45 acres of that parcel to residential, as highlighted in yellow on the map on the right, and approximately 4.5 acres along State Road 100 will be designated as mixed use. The equivalent change to that in terms of zoning, if I might just look at the map on the right, would be that the area of the parcel to be designated as residential will be zoned as multifamily residential 2, while the portion of the parcel designated as mixed use along State Road 100 will be designated as commercial 2 or general commercial. And that zoning change will be from the previous county designation of general commercial for the entire parcel, along with that agriculture piece up on the northwest corner. With any future land use map amendment, we do an analysis of its impacts to public facilities. And here we see that there are changes. There will be an increase in impacts on public facilities, such as, again, these are net impact analysis. Transportation, there's potential for 100 additional trips in the PM peak hour, approximately 0.134 million gallons per day additional in demand on water, and 0.09 additional demand on sewer, along with some other changes to solid waste, additional park demands, and an additional demand on the school system of approximately 133 students. And again, that analysis was provided at the maximum development potential. Looking at the environmental factors, as Mr. Tyner stated, this parcel has received a water management district permit, and those wetlands have been delineated and permitted for impacts or have been protected through conservation easement. Although not shown, there's approximately 13 acres of wetlands on this 50-acre parcel that have been set aside already and protected by a conservation easement. Another analysis that we provide is the consistency of the proposed flume designation with the surrounding parcels. As you can see, the proposed residential is generally consistent with the areas to the north, while although it's surrounded by mixed use to the west and to the east, again, we have buffer requirements that would protect that would provide mitigation for the residential areas from the commercial areas. So reviewing for the proposed amendments consistency with a comprehensive plan, again, you have the availability of infrastructure near the parcels. You have land use patterns that do not increase the cost of providing utilities. The impact on environmental conditions have been mitigated and identified. Its location of a commercial non-residential development along major arterial at State Road 100 is consistent. And again, there is the consistency with the surrounding land uses. As required by our land development code, a neighborhood meeting for this project was held on May 22nd. And again, the planning board held a public hearing on this application on June 12, 2019. And at that time, staff and the planning board recommended City Council approve this application. Moving on to the zoning map amendment. Again, we've briefly highlighted that the change is from the general commercial designation for the entire parcel to a designation of multifamily residential along about approximately 45 acres and 4.5 acres of of general commercial use will remain along State Road 100. Looking at the criteria in our land development code for proposed zoning map amendments, we find that this application is consistent with those criteria. It does not cause a significant financial liability or hardship on the city in that you have water and wastewater lines within proximity of the site. Does it promote efficient land use patterns and location of non-residential uses? Again, its location along State Road 100 and its access to State Road 100 is appropriate for the proposed uses on the site. There's no threat to the general health, safety, and welfare of the community. The project must still comply with other local, state, and federal regulations, and it is compatible with the surrounding land uses. And again, this application has gone through the appropriate neighborhood and public meetings. So with that, staff and the planning board also recommend approval. The City Council approved the application 3976, which is the zoning map amendment for these parcels. And as the next steps for this application, after today's public hearing, we will transmit the application to the state and other state agencies for their review and comment. And after receiving those comments, we will bring back the future land use map amendment and the zoning map amendment for a second public hearing with City Council. And in the future, there will still need to be site plan or plat approvals for this parcel. We'll be happy to entertain any questions, but I do know that the applicant and the representatives are here to answer any additional questions.
Were there many respondents to the community outreach, the neighborhood meetings?
There were no residents who attended the neighborhood meeting.
Understood. Council, questions?
What would be the impact on wildlife out there?
Certainly with any development, there will always be an amount of impact. I think it would be no greater than someone clearing a new parcel for a subdivision, or even when someone starts to clear land even within the existing Palm Coast area. There will be some displacement of wildlife that's there.
And I just had Councilmember Howe, after the rezoning, if this is approved and they come in for the site plan application, that's when we do a very thorough, detailed analysis of the environmental resources, looking at gopher tortoises, looking at other threatened and endangered species. They've already completed some of the work regarding with wetlands and put some conservation areas from a higher level, but we will really get into those details, and their consultant will be a biologist, a certified person to do the environmental analysis.
Yeah, my concern primarily is for the protected species such as the gopher turtle.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And Ray, and that's also when the applicant will have to address the school concurrency issue. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little concerning. Obviously, commercial doesn't generate a need for any additional seats in schools, but I'll leave it to the school board. But the last time I checked, Old Kings Elementary was at capacity. And
Yes, sir.
I know they have a problem, a future problem with providing sufficient capacity, so.
The applicant, the school district, has coordinated as required by any application to basically get a statement on its impact on schools, and they've done that. At the time of site plan is at the time that the concurrency test is provided, which there needs to be proof that they are able to accommodate the impact of the new students. And with our concurrency agreement with the school district and Flagler County, we have to take into account the capacity of the entire district, essentially, to see if there is available room at the schools. And barring that, then there might need to be a proportionate share agreement or some type of mitigation agreement that the school district and the applicant would have to come to.
And I know this is a couple steps down the road from this application, but what's the envisioned product for this? Apartments, condominiums?
If the applicant would like to address that one, I know it's addresses multifamily at this time. I'm not sure if they've thought that far ahead as to.
If they don't, they don't. That's
Yes,
fine.
Good morning, Michael. For the applicant, to answer your question, Mr. Cuff, right now we envision, it's a 54-acre parcel, some combination of both rental and ownership, so condominium and/or apartment. Given its location to the public shopping plaza and Flagler Beach, and then the city and the interstate, we are envisioning, that type of community with a master set of covenants and restrictions and shared amenities with some commercial along State Road 100 to service the daily needs. So that's what we're dealing with now. The market changes, we're not sure though. I'll answer any questions that you may have. Again, this is 2 parcels of land that are annexed into the city of Palm Coast rather than develop it and get entitlements into Flagler County, which we were, and deal with those issues that we've seen in the past. We felt that the path of least resistance is just to come in now and work with your staff and envision what the city of Palm Coast would like. So again, this is one of the requirements that you do when you annex lands into the Palm Coast from another jurisdictions. So this is what we have to offer. There aren't any plans specifically. I do want to draw your attention again and emphasize for the record that we have already been through the environmental permitting on this process through the St. John's Water Management District and our Army Corps of Engineers. So there has been some preliminary environmental assessment on the property. We've had permits that allow for mitigating wetlands on site, and by doing that we've placed conservation easements over large pieces existing for the preservation of trees and wetlands. So we've already taken that step to give us the base area on which to develop and design the ultimate product. Traffic will be handled when we actually get the actual use in there, and we'll have to go through the concurrency studies then. And so I believe, other than that, all utilities and services by Palm Coast are available to the site, so there is no reason to be concerned at the comp plan analysis time. Answer any questions that you or the public may have. Thank you.
Council? No? Thank you. Okay, let's open up for public participation. Anyone who would like to address the council on item G4, go ahead and do so now. You'll have 3 minutes once you approach the podium and give us your name.
Okay.
Morning.
Good morning. My name is Ivory Johnson. Deborah is my daughter. I moved here 2003, and I love it, the question I have to ask is that I recently, I guess about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, I began to move things out of my home that need to be shredded. Rather than doing this, I was looking for this place in Palm Coast off of US 1 that the one was telling me about, but I couldn't find it. After about 2.5 hours, I was sitting there and says, there's got to be a truck coming in and out. And I saw this truck going in, just shredding. I followed, and it was sitting back. So naturally I asked them, why don't you advertise? We are not allowed to put those type of signs where they can be seen off the street. That don't make sense. Anyway, I didn't let it bother me. And I'm a member of St. Thomas Episcopal Church. And it wasn't said to me, but I overheard it where they couldn't put certain types of signs out there. Well, I put signs in my yard all the time, political signs. So I want to know, what's the reason for this prohibition against putting up a sign to advertise that I have a business or something going on here? That's just a simple, I hope I can get a simple answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker? No, I'll close public participation. I will answer that directly. More or less, it comes down to long precedent that the city of Palm Coast has set for a quality of life issue. We've decided that to limit signs is the direction that the city wants to go, and the difficult part about allowing certain signs and not allowing certain signs is that it goes against the Constitution. If you have to read the sign to create a rule to not allow that sign, then that's not allowable. So instead, we've been forced to heavy-handed blanket statement that we disallow any type of signage in that regard. But again, in the public, the political signs that you can have on your lawn, different story. Again, private property, you can have a political sign, but for commercial use and our right-of-ways, we don't allow signage to be put out, and it's enforced by our code enforcement. Moving on, let's go ahead. Do I have a motion for item G4?
Motion to
Make that
approve.
motion, we approve it.
Second.
Second, okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? All right, motion passes 4-0. Bill, did you need to read item 5 for the record?
Did not.
Okay, understood.
Happy to now.
Would you like to?
I would like to.
Fair.
Fair enough. Okay, item G5, this is an ordinance, Mr. Vice Mayor, Council, the City Council, the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the official zoning map as established in Section 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code. This ordinance amends the official zoning map for 49 acres more or less of certain real property generally located 1/4 mile west of Colbert Lane on the north side of State Road 100, more particularly described in the attached Exhibit A to the ordinance. We are amending the zoning from Flagler County designations of general commercial, or C2, and agricultural, to general commercial, or COM2, and multifamily residential 2, or MFR2, City of Palm Coast designations. This ordinance provides for conflict, severability, and for an effective date. Mr. Vice Mayor, Council, this matter is another of your quasi-judicial matters. It's first reading, so if there have been any ex-parte communications on this matter prior to today's hearing, those should be disclosed at this time.
Council?
Nothing.
None.
City
Council, as
Council,
you've heard, staff has made the presentation.
Yeah, we have nothing further to add. We're here to take any questions on this item.
This is the corresponding zoning to the prior item.
Any questions?
Actually, one for staff, Ray. The sort of triangular parcel that's adjacent to this property to the west, is that in the city or not in the city?
That is in the city, yes, sir.
Is in the city?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll open this up for public participation as well. If anyone would like to comment on item G5, please approach the podium, and you can do so. You'll have 3 minutes. All right, we'll close public participation. I will bring it back to this council for a motion.
Move approval of item number 5 on first reading.
Seconded by Jack Howell. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion passes 4-0. Moving on to item G6 is an ordinance for future land use map amendment for 2.8 more or less acres of land located 250 feet northwest of Old Kings Road Extension and Matanzas Woods Parkway intersection from conservation to Greenbelt Advent Health.
Mr. Vice Mayor, the title of this ordinance is as follows. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the City of Palm Coast 2035 Comprehensive Plan as previously amended. This is pursuant to Section 163.3184 of the Florida statutes. This ordinance amends the future land use map or flume designation for 2 acres, more or less, an area within a 6.5 acre, more or less, parcel located 250 feet northwest of the Old Kings Road Extension and Matanzas Woods Parkway intersection, as more particularly described in Exhibit A attached to the ordinance. Amending from conservation to Greenbelt, this ordinance provides for codification, severability, and for an effective date. Since this is a future land use map amendment, Mr. Vice Mayor, this is a legislative matter.
Thank you. Staff?
Thank you, City Council. Ray Tyner, Planning Manager. Typically, this is for a 2.8 acre change from conservation to Greenbelt. And just a little bit of background, when we did our comprehensive plan and we designated conservation areas, it was predominantly done by aerial interpretation. So when an applicant comes in and they have a proposed development, now this one is the future Advent Health Facility, they will provide us details of that conservation area of what was done, aerial interpretation. So they get on the ground, they delineate the wetland systems, and then we have the ability to change and make sure it's consistent with our comprehensive plan. So we are proposing this change based on field data of where that conservation flume actually is. But Mr. Papa will have those details in the staff presentation.
Good morning again. So this proposed amendment is for a 2.8 acre area within a larger 6.5 acre parcel. The boundary of the parcel is shown in yellow, and that comprises 6.5 acres, while the area subject to this future land use map amendment is shown in the hatched areas, and that comprises approximately 2.8 acres. So this parcel is currently vacant, and Advent Health is the applicant, with a proposal that this will be developed as an emergency department with medical office buildings. Shown on the left is the existing future land use map, showing that area currently subject to this amendment as conservation, and the area or the map to the left shows the post-amendment condition of having a 6.5 acre parcel entirely designated as greenbelt. The current zoning on the parcel is public, semi-public, which would accommodate a hospital. Again, we provided a public facilities impact analysis, and it's shown here that essentially with a conservation designation, there's really no true development potential. So if you would have kept it as conservation, there would have been no impact on transportation, water, or sewer, whereas the proposed change would permit a building with a floor area ratio of about 0.3. And so you would have some increased impacts on transportation network, on water and sewer treatment capacity. But those changes are such that it can be accommodated by our existing facilities. So within the surrounding area, the proposed designation is consistent with the adjacent areas. The big issue here is it's the evaluation of the environmental factors on the area. And this analysis was conducted by our environmental team within the city. So within the analysis, it indicates that the proposed change from conservation to greenbelt is consistent with a comprehensive plan based on the jurisdictional authority that these are not considered as wetlands by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that there are additional wetlands on site, but may be deemed of moderate quality. And also, in reviewing it against our policy for conservation, there are no significant environmental features found within the subject site, as in there are no oak hammocks or other native vegetation, and there were no natural water bodies or lakes within that subject area. So reviewing it for other comprehensive plan policies, again, you have the availability of infrastructure on the site. It is on a growing corridor, Matanzas Woods Parkway, so the utilities are there. And again, its location as a commercial or non-residential development, within a growing arterial, such as Matanzas Woods Parkway, is an appropriate location for this change. So it's consistent with surrounding land uses, the change is consistent with a comprehensive plan, and the change provides no significant impact on level of service for public infrastructure. As required by the Land Development Code, we did a neighborhood meeting. Although required by the code, the land use administrator has the authority to waive such meeting. And in this case, such a meeting was waived since the adjacent owners are essentially those parties that are already involved with this project. The adjacent owners included Flagler County, who is currently the owner of this land, the city of Palm Coast, were the ones processing the application, and the parcel to the east of this subject parcel, Matanzas Holdings LLC, share the same agent as Advent Health, and so that neighborhood meeting was waived. The planning board meeting was held on June 12, 2019, and at that meeting, staff and along with the Planning and Land Development Regulation Board recommended that City Council approve this proposed future land use map amendment. So being a small-scale amendment, if approved today, this item will be scheduled for on the first meeting in August for City Council's second reading. And in the future, there was still the need for a site plan and plat approval as part of, before going vertical on this site. Staff will be happy to answer any questions, but the applicant or their representative is here to address any other questions you might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jose. I, for one, am very excited that Advent Health would be interested in putting an emergency medical center on that parcel. I think with it's very accessible from the highway. It has the school right there. Just to me, it seems like it is a place where people will be able to get to quickly and then hopefully be helped. But Council, do we have any other questions, concerns?
It seems to me, I remember we had a large contingency of residents up in that neck of the woods. Of course, at that time, we were talking about the Publix, but they're right down the street from each other, and there was a lot of concern about that. Now, I agree. We certainly could use that emergency facility there. You know, it's right next to the high school, and like you say, it's right on 95. And so from where that's located, I would support it.
Council? No? Excellent. Okay, I'll open this up for public participation. If anyone would like to comment on item G6, please approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes once you start.
Good morning, Council. Mr. Neelabuck from the R section. Matanzas and, what is it, BBB, the street that...
Burgers in Paradise?
BB, the main drag. I can't think of it.
Matanzas?
Matanzas, not Matanzas.
And then Old Kings North and...
Beltaire?
From there, from Old Kings down to one where this is going to be, are they going to increase this to a 4-lane? Are we going to have 2 lanes going from US 1 to the hospital, to Beltaire, that's what I'm thinking of. Okay, that whole area, you're developing, you're putting this in, you're putting that in, and again, traffic. That's a 1-lane road, Matanzas, going from 1 all the way up to the school. We should put that plan to increase that roadway when you're going to increase this kind of construction. Hospital brings in a lot. And it's going to get bigger. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. So let's be smart and do the roadways before we build. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, again, it's Deborah Wells.
Morning.
And I'm actually brought to this meeting for this particular amendment proposal. Family friend, Jasmine, is excited to be going to Matanzas Wood High School starting next month, 9th grade. Ostensibly, she will still be in high school during the construction and use of this emergency room. How close is it to her school? Will she be taking a test and all of a sudden there's drilling and construction equipment going on across the street? What happens when sirens are going by? Will that disrupt athletics, whether it's rehearsals or practices or games? We have to consider the emergency room is a place of speed. And it's in a sort of Z pattern where cars go around that corner and have to make a quick left. That's right by the school. Is there going to be construction during the summer when the classes are out, or are they going to be hearing drilling while they're in class? So I'm wondering if we're all considering putting this type of a land use of an emergency department with possibly helicopters flying over, taking people to bigger hospitals because they need more care, and especially the idea of sirens and speeding ambulances in a very small, albeit 2-lane highway, as the previous gentleman said. I'm concerned for the kids that walk home from that school. Will they be hit by cars and ambulances coming around that corner at speeds that may exceed their ability to turn around, especially while they're on their phones texting or have headphones in? What about the kids that live in the F section? They're going to be crossing behind that new emergency department. Is there going to be space for them? Are there going to be lights up so that they can walk in the morning when it's dark? or coming home from an after-school activity when it's dark, are sideways going to be railed so these kids are not being attacked, they're not being hit by cars. When we had this problem last year where a child was killed in the L section because lights weren't up, there was no place for that child to walk, and came home late and got hit by a car. That should teach us that we are going to put high-use places next to schools. We've got to look out for our kids. And I hope you all consider that in your deliberations, and I thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Morning.
Morning.
Jeffrey Seib. I'm here today to speak out against the amending of the comprehensive plan that is proposed for this property and to request the City Council reject any further release, sale, swap, or giveaway of the public lands located in the Matanzas Woods Parkway area. This property is not ready for any comprehensive plan action by this council. It is owned by Flagler County, operating for a developer, and under a wetland draining and filling permit review by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers has not issued any letter of permit for this action, and according to them, a notice of intent to permit does not cancel any local jurisdiction. The city's arbitrary rating system of high, medium, and low quality for wetlands misses the point. Many wetlands here have been damaged by the forest management practices of the past and the roadway and building activities since then. But the fact remains we need all our wetlands to serve as watersheds as storms and flooding become more intense with sea level rise. These city-owned areas, even if fenced off from the public as they are now, should be maintained as part of our quality of life as called for in the comprehensive plan. Many sections of the comp plan seem to have been ignored or overlooked here. My take on the comprehensive plan is that it's an inclusive document. You don't go through picking only the sections that agree with a proposal. If a proposal can't stand up to the entire document, it should not be approved. The comprehensive plan introduction identifies the city's core planning values, such as protection of natural resources and natural ecosystems, and states that Palm Coast will be uniquely recognized for its valued natural resources and open spaces. Chapter 1 of the comprehensive plan, the future land use element, calls for the preservation of environmental resources and specifically the preservation of interconnected wetland systems, of which this is one, wildlife corridors, and aquifer recharge zones. Chapter 6 of the comprehensive plan acknowledges the long history of destroying wetlands in our community and calls for the city to promote restoration activities. Specifically, in Chapter 6, Policy 6.1.10.5 states that the city shall cooperate with neighboring governments in order to conserve and protect wetlands and other sensitive vegetative communities that exist in more than one jurisdiction. The people of Palm Coast in your own citizen survey have spoken that natural habitats are a top priority. My 3 minutes speaking here are nothing compared to the weeks and months of time spent on this proposal by city staff at taxpayer expense, preparing the proposal for approval by the City Council. But again, I urge you to vote against any zoning change that would allow any land use other than what is there now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker. All right, we will close public participation. First, I will address the transportation needs. In the Public Facilities Impact Report, currently that road operates at between a B and a C, and the potential net increase wouldn't exceed it past a level of service to C. And I think this also goes back to the maximum footprint of construction in that area. Basically, from what I understand, that parcel is very limited in size, and that's also part of the swap that we did. There's not much room to develop further behind there, from what I understand. I could be wrong. I'll ask staff to correct me if I am. But moving on, as far as Deborah's concerns, I would play devil's advocate and say that we would want an emergency facility as close to our young children as we want. If there's an emergency and lives are in risk, I would hate for time to be of the essence and that not to be also a counter argument to your points. I agree that construction could be a concern, and we should absolutely pay attention to the students during times of testing, et cetera, because that obviously impacts their level of education that they receive. So I think that's something that we absolutely should pay attention to. I, for one, feel that the benefits of having an emergency facility there in case of an emergency would outweigh those negatives that would have a conclusion date. Once the construction's done, then we would start to discuss the other items that you spoke about emergency vehicles, driving quickly and things like that, and sidewalks, illumination. But I personally feel that the benefit would outweigh the negatives there. Jeffrey, I appreciate your concerns, although I have to defer to our staff and our boards as far as wetland mitigation and also the underlying species that are impacted. This right now is just the future land use map amendment, so as far as site planning and site approval, that would come at, am I correct in saying that this is just for the land use amendment and this is nothing of that sort, right?
For land use amendment.
Perfect.
If I could even clarify a little bit further, Mr. Vice Mayor, and for those in the audience, all we're doing this morning is changing the future land use map on just 2.8 acres of the site. We're not changing the future land use map designation for the entire site. And we are changing it, or contemplating changing it, from conservation to greenbelt. Now, what are the actual impacts, if any, of that? Those would be the relevant legal concerns for your consideration this morning on this item. This is not a rezoning. This is not a site plan. This is just a potential future land use map change from conservation to greenbelt. So what are the issue would be, obviously, what are the potential real-world ramifications, if any, of changing from conservation to greenbelt?
Yep, so our decisions have to be scoped to that. So I appreciate the concerns, but as far as the future land use map amendment, I don't see them being 100% applicable. I will bring it back to this council for a motion.
Just before we vote, I just realized that this has to do with Advent Health, and my son does work for Advent Health. Does that disqualify me?
No, sir, that is not a voting conflict.
That's okay.
I am concerned with the points that is it Slibe? Sibe. Mr. Sibe raised. Jeff, you really got my interest there. And I would appreciate if I could get a copy of your notes to help me. But for right now, because it's just a technicality, there's no building, we'll go ahead and I'll
email it to you. That be okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. No, understood. Fair, so now I'll bring it back to this council for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. 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 All those against say nay. Motion passes 4-0. Moving on to section H, resolutions. Resolution number 7 is the adoption of the maximum millage rate or trim rate and setting the public hearing date, time, and location for the fiscal year 2020 budget. Morning, Helena.
Hello, good morning. Yes, we're here presenting to you the resolution to adopt the maximum millage rate, as well as setting the tentative budget hearing to be held on Wednesday, September 4th at 5:05. I have here the presentation that we brought before you on Tuesday. First, I look at our budget timeline. As you can see, we started this process earlier in the year, and we're now at the point where we're actually having our budget workshops with City Council. We will bring back to you on the 30th the proprietary funds. Today, we're going to go over how is this budget addressing council priorities, also our proposed 2020 millage rate, any personnel changes, our general fund revenues and expenditures, and the millage rate recommendation. This is a view as how your priorities are addressed. The pavement program is not impacted by the general fund, but it is at the moment fully funded from the Streets Improvement Fund. The Public Works Facility, the initial temporary improvements have been started in 2020, and we are working to bring back to you the capital projects fund in August, and we'll outline what the timeline is. Street light master program is impacted in the general fund by operating expenditures, and we have $950,000 budgeted there. And then also have budgeted some of your priorities regarding the Shop Local campaign and expanding our utilization of communication mediums, as well as new ventures in the Innovation District. Now, part of the Innovation District priorities are also funded by the CRA budget, which you'll see later in the month. As you can see here, we are proposing to maintain the same millage rate that we had in 2019 at 4.6989. This is a look at positions that are being requested for the general fund. As you can see, we're requesting an additional 10.5 positions, and in the next slide we'll go into detail as to what those are. The city manager's office is requesting an administrative assistant. The streets and park maintenance, 3 equipment operators, and we're proposing to upgrade a part-time position to full-time. Finance is requesting a senior finance technician. The Administrative Services Economic Development is requesting a record specialist and Innovation Economic Development Coordinator. Fire Department, a staff assistant. The Planning Department, a development manager. And Parks and Recreation is eliminating the Gulf Pro, but it's requested to reclassify seasonal hours to 2 full-time positions. This is a look at the summary for the general fund. We'll go into detail in the upcoming slides. As you can see, we're projecting a transfer from 2019 to the capital projects fund, and once we look at that budget, you'll have an opportunity to look at what we're proposing for that $1 million. We're also proposing adding to contingency for the fiscal year 2020. It's an attempt to deal with any fluctuations that we might have in costs, if there's any unexpected costs that we encounter, or if we're not able to fully fund the pavement program from the Streets Improvement Fund, we'll be able to use some of that contingency. A look at our administrative department. As you can see, we have the personnel changes that are requested: administrative assistant, a record specialist, senior finance technician, and the Innovation and Economic Development Coordinator. The decrease in the construction management engineering is due to we are direct allocating costs versus allocations that happened before in the stormwater engineering and utility budgets. In this budget, we are requesting a new position, a development manager, and you'll also notice the code enforcement budget is increasing, and that is mostly due to hazardous tree removals, but there is offsetting revenue for those hazardous tree removal services costs. The the Public Safety Division, Fire Department is requesting a new staff assistant, and the law enforcement includes a 5% increase as per the contract that we have with the Sheriff's Office. Parks and Recreation, the golf position is being eliminated, and there's 2 seasonal positions that are being reclassified to full-time positions. This is where you see the bulk of the increase in budget is in the Streets and Parks Maintenance Division. They are requesting 2 equipment operators and a 3rd equipment operator to start when Holland Park Phase 2 is complete. And we're also requesting to upgrade a part-time position to full-time, and with all these new positions also comes the equipment that gets allocated. This is a look at our non-departmental. As you can see, the change is in the transfer to the Capital Projects Fund. That is a transfer from our reserves, and the decrease because of last year's transfer to the IT fund. This is a look at our millage rate and property tax history. As you can see, our values have been increasing, steadily increasing, and the July 1st certified tax value received from the Property Appraiser's Office projects a 9% increase for our property values. This is a summary of our millage rate options. The rollback rate is at 4.2963. Your 2020 majority vote would be a millage rate of 6.1498. 2020 two-third vote, 6.7648. And our proposed millage rate, same as fiscal year 2019, 4.6989. If there were any questions?
Even better the second time, Helena. Thank you very much. Questions, council?
Yeah, what is our debt? What are we in the hole for?
The bulk of our debt is in the utility fund, and I believe it's around, right below the 200 million point mark.
All right, that's what I thought. I wasn't sure.
Questions, council? No? Open this up for public participation, Virginia, right?
Yes.
I'll open up item G6 for public participation if you'd like to address the council, or I'm sorry, H7. If you'd like to address the council, please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin. Nope. All right, we will close public participation. I will bring it back to this council for resolution to adopt the maximum millage trim rate and set the public hearing date, time, and location for our fiscal year 2020 budget.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against? See none, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Helena. Item H8 is a resolution approving the nuisance abatement initial assessment. Mr. Morton?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council. Back in March 2010, City Council adopted Ordinance 2010-03, Public Nuisance, and that provided for the creation of the assessment area to authorize the imposition of nuisance abatement assessments, to be included on an annual ad valorem tax bill. That tax bill will be sent out by the county collector. So in essence, when the city abates a nuisance, which we give opportunity throughout that process for the citizen to abate it, at that point when we go out and abate the nuisance, we then create or send a bill to the property tax owner. There's multiple opportunities to pay. This, in fact, is certifying that role for this year, and our intent to use this uniform ad valorem method to go ahead and collect those outstanding assessments. This will be that role and assessment. The resolution is a need to adopt the preliminary assessment role, and by way of process, there is still at least one more opportunity, I believe 2, for property owners to pay the assessment before it goes to the ad valorem bill, but this is certifying, continuing on our process to do that.
Superb. I believe that this is going to empower the city to try to get these wrongdoers in line, but obviously they'll still have an opportunity to make things right. Council, any questions, comments? No? Open it up for public participation on item H8, which is the resolution approving the Nuisance Abatement Act. You'll have 3 minutes to address the council as soon as you approach the podium. All right, we will close public participation, and I'll bring it back to this council for a motion.
Approval.
Seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say nay. Motion passes 4-0. Moving on, item I, which is the consent agenda. If anyone, do it to public participation first. If anyone would like to speak to the council about items I-9 or I-10, you can do so now. Approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes once you state your name for the record. Okay. Bring it back to this council. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items 9 and 10.
I'll make that motion to approve those items, 9 and 10.
All those in favor say aye. 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 All those against say nay. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, public participation, item J. Anyone who would like to issue a public comment to our council, you can approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes once you state your name for the record. Morning.
Good morning again, George Mayo, Palm Coast. A couple questions concerning what is the status of the Wawa development on Bulldog and 100? And across the street, Airport Commons, I see they're clearing land. What was the agreement that the city came to with the council? Has that property been annexed, or is there just a interlocal agreement between the two governments? And I also see that the state passed a law ordinance that allowing front yard gardens. Is that something that will interfere with our ordinances? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name again is Deborah Wells. This is my first city council meeting, but I've been to others in New York City. Nothing like this one. But I'm here so that I can expose young people to what local government means, and you are participating in local government when you go to a city council meeting. But I also have a problem of my own to discuss. There are parts of this city, especially the access roads to the service roads off Palm Coast Parkway westbound, which are falling apart. I'm running over not potholes, but huge craters, and it's ruining my tires. I make a right turn off of Belterre onto West Hampton in that huge W subdivision, and I'm actually seeing pavements come to a complete stop and then a dip of about a foot into just dirt. If you don't make that curve at just the right speed, you've just lost a tire. And maybe you'll be stuck in that little corner there. Who's in charge of making sure that our roads are paved to the standard of I-95? I was always amazed at how beautiful Florida's roads were compared to Manhattan and Brooklyn. But I'd like to see that in Palm Coast. I don't want to ruin any more tires. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Next speaker. Morning.
Morning, gentlemen. My name is Denise Calderwood, volunteer CEO of Family Matters of Flagler, which was founded in Palm Coast, and I'm proud to say we have a Palm Coast business tax receipt finally, because apparently Palm Coast doesn't require not-for-profits to have them, but in order to participate in your Food Truck Tuesdays, we had to have one, and so it took us 6 months to try to resolve that issue so that our application could actually be semi-reviewed to be approved for us to have a food truck there so that we can raise funds for our struggling not-for-profit that has taken responsibility or took responsibility for Palm Coast's homeless people that live behind the library. For you to just give you an update, I don't know if you ever heard or got the results of what occurred where the new sheriff's administration, or excuse me, substation is going to be. There were just 38 people that were living there permanently, and very successfully, I shall say. The pictures did not do the community justice. I mean, yes, there were health issues. There was drug paraphernalia. We had determined that it was mostly used for diabetic supplies, and we had since found out that the health department was providing ineffective supplies, I guess, basically for the diabetics' needs, and they were actually giving them the needles, and of course we all know how that goes. But anyway, just to give you an update, obviously there is nobody there now living behind the library, since it is an active construction zone and it's a arrestable offense if that is the case. We volunteered to do the case management of those individuals along with Flagler County Social Services and the sheltering tree of Flagler County. 3 disabled adults were reunited with their family. Those were people who were getting Social Security checks, and when we did the investigation, we found out that they were getting them out of state, and the people actually happened to be here. So we got those people reunited with their families out of Flagler County and in other states. 3 families moved to Volusia County permanently in permanent housing, and that took with collaboration with the Volusia Flagler Homeless Coalition. 12 senior citizens were living behind the library with an average check of $800. 3 of them had law enforcement issues, people living in the library. 3 were dealt with and detained. 2 of them had moved out of Flagler County for good. 7 of the residents were permanently placed in Flagler County housing. 12 relocated around the city, scattered, and they are still homeless, and now they are just scattered throughout. Providing services to them or offering them services very difficult to maintain. I mean, those are the ones you're still getting calls about. But we wanted to just let you know that if you read in the newspapers and see the information, it's what buys the time right now, and they're all sound bites, but it's taken due diligence. We do have a problem with dearth of affordable housing in Palm Coast specifically, not even following your own affordable housing plan. And $800, I beg all of you to try to live on that a month successfully. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Calderwood. Next speaker? I think we got everybody. All right. Mr. Tyner, do you mind taking the questions for the front yard gardens, the airport commons, and also addressing Wawa?
Sure. Airport Commons, we did a tri-party interlocal agreement with the county and the applicant. They will annex. What we did is once they start construction, because we didn't want to interfere with their development and hold them back, so eventually the agreement is that they will annex. Outdoor front yard gardens, yes, that is a state law. We would require or we would allow gardens in the front yard. So that is a new state law. The fencing material will still comply with our code, 3 foot high around there. So we haven't seen, actually I think we have one application, that's it now. Wawa, it's still go. I think there were some rumors out there because they withdrew their building permit. And the reason that they withdrew their building permit because they have a new prototype. And they want to utilize their new prototype for Palm Coast. So if we don't have the new permit in with their brand new prototype, interior prototype, we're going to have it any day now. So I spoke to the representatives and they're still go and they're looking forward to coming here in Palm Coast.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Deborah, your questions. Young people are our future, so thank you for getting people involved at a young age. It is really the future lies in the hands of the young people today. So thank you very much. Perhaps one day you'll be sitting up here making decisions about rezonings and such. Also, the potholes, I would encourage you to check out our new application, the Palm Coast Connect app. It allows you to take pictures and then actually submit them to the city so that we can address these real time. I do understand that sometimes turning lanes do get washed out and it is that foot drop. So if you could just be proactive like you're being and just ensure that you get a picture over a visual and we'll have communication back and forth that whether it's been addressed or the intent to address it. So absolutely, I thank you very much for being engaged. Ms. Calderwood, great to hear that your food truck is on the way to be participating on our Tuesday food trucks. Thank you very much for your hard work reuniting the families in Flagler County and in Palm Coast. Those are tremendous initiatives, and I'm hopeful that we can still work as a coalition together and ensure that there's solutions available for anyone else who is looking to take such initiatives. So I thank you for your efforts. Okay, moving on, we have item K, which is discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. Councilman Cuff?
Nothing for this meeting.
Councilman Barquino?
I just want to say something to Matthew Morton. Matthew, it's been a pleasure, still a pleasure, it will be a pleasure, I guarantee you, been working with you. The 3 or 4 times I went to you with problems that were presented to me, you were always there and you were speedy, and for that I thank you, and I'm pretty sure that next things, a few other things will be in the future, but what happened last week regarding this golf course, you took action, and you took action right away. It was something that needed to be done, and you took action right away. That's what I like, and you did it. So for that, thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was a little scared when he said, it's been a pleasure, I was expecting it, but.
Okay.
Moving on, Councilman Howell?
Well, you know, your pothole is just a little something to remember why you left New York. You know, just a little something. But the reality is that, you know, we've got a great city. Young lady, I suggest, as a freshman at Matanzas High School, you get involved in the city council, I mean the student council there, you know, right up from the get-go, or a class officer. You know, then you'll really start the process. Other than that, I've got nothing.
Excellent. Plus, that's why you fly, right, to avoid the potholes?
That's right.
Gotcha.
That's right. Ain't no pothole.
I have nothing to add to this discussion. Moving on to item L, discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Nothing, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And item M, which is discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
Nothing, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Superb. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make it.
Adjourned. That was the beginning one.